Chapter 1. The Hidden Cost of Not Knowing. You wake up every morning believing that your hard work is enough. You put on your shoes, step out into the world, and give your time away in exchange for a paycheck. At first glance, it feels like life is moving forward. You are paying your bills, maybe putting a little aside, and hoping that someday things will naturally get better. Yet beneath that surface, there's a quiet erosion taking place, and it is invisible to most until decades have already passed. That erosion is ignorance. It is not the ignorance of laziness or lack of intelligence, but the ignorance that comes from never being taught how money actually works, how wealth is built, and how freedom is secured. The hidden cost of not knowing is not always obvious in your 20s, when energy and optimism still carry you through. You may believe that simply working harder, accepting promotions, or switching jobs will inevitably lead to a better life. But time has a way of revealing truths that effort alone cannot fix. A man who earns $50,000 a year, but spends every cent without understanding the principle of saving and investing may one day look back after 30 years and realize he has handled $1.5 million over his career, yet has nothing to show for it. The numbers are staggering when stretched across a lifetime, and they tell a painful story. Without knowledge, money slips through your fingers like water. Imagine this scene. Two friends graduate from the same school in 1995. They both earn similar salaries, around $30,000 per year at the beginning. One of them, without guidance or financial awareness, simply follows the rhythm of spending what comes in. A nicer car here, dinners out, vacations financed with credit cards. The other, armed with just a basic understanding that compound growth is the eighth wonder of the world, sets aside $200 a month in a simple index fund. Fast forward 25 years, and the difference is monumental. The first is memories of purchases long gone and debt that never seems to shrink. The second has quietly built a portfolio worth well over $200,000, even without earning more money than his friend. That is the price of ignorance, measured not just in numbers, but in opportunities missed, stress accumulated, and dreams delayed. You might think the tragedy lies only in lost money, but it goes deeper than that. The true cost of not knowing is measured in years of life spent under constant pressure. It is the family that cannot afford proper health care, because medical bills wipe out savings every time someone falls ill. It is the couple who argues night after night over unpaid credit cards, never realizing that their ignorance of budgeting is silently poisoning their relationship. It is the individual who works into old age, not because they love their job, but because retirement is impossible without knowledge applied in earlier years. Every sleepless night caused by financial stress is another hidden payment extracted by ignorance. There is also a generational weight to this. When you grow up in a household where money is never discussed openly, where debt is normal and saving is rare, you inherit not only habits but blind spots. Parents who never learned about financial literacy pass their silence down to their children, and the cycle repeats. A child who sees their parents struggling, but never hears conversations about investing, budgeting, or building assets, grows into an adult vulnerable to the same traps. Thus, ignorance multiplies its costs across families and generations. The absence of education is not neutral. It actively shapes destinies. Consider the story of Elena, a young woman raised by hardworking parents who never talked about money. She entered the workforce eager and motivated, earning $35,000 per year at her first job. She believed success meant buying the car her friends admired, eating out several times a week, and upgrading her wardrobe whenever she felt like it. Credit cards made it easy, and minimum payments seemed harmless. By the time she was 29, she owed over $20,000 in debt, paying nearly $500 each month just in interest. That meant $6,000 a year leaving her pocket, without building a single asset. Over a decade, that ignorance would cost her $60,000, more than the price of a home in many small towns. She did not choose this outcome out of carelessness, but out of not knowing. The rules of money were never explained to her, and the hidden cost was extracted silently, month after month. Ignorance is expensive because the world is designed to profit from it. Credit card companies build billion-dollar empires on the backs of consumers who do not understand compound interest. Banks collect overdraft fees from people who were never taught to balance a checking account. Payday lenders thrive in neighborhoods where financial education is scarce, charging rates so outrageous that the borrower often ends up paying back 2 or 3 times what they originally borrowed. These institutions do not need to trick you. They only need you to remain uninformed. The less you know, the higher the price you pay, and the more trapped you become. But ignorance does not only cost you money, it costs you choices. When you do not understand how money works, you accept whatever life hands you. You take jobs you hate because the paycheck is your only lifeline. You stay in toxic relationships because financial independence feels impossible. You silence your dreams of traveling, of starting a business, of living with freedom, because the cost of ignorance has already chained you to obligations you do not know how to escape. Without education, the future is dictated not by your vision, but by your lack of options. As you reflect on your own life, you may already see the shadows of these costs. Maybe it is a lingering debt you cannot shake, or the stress that flares every time an unexpected bill arrives. Maybe it is a haunting thought that despite years of work, you are no closer to financial security than when you began. These feelings are not random. They are symptoms of the hidden cost of not knowing. And though you cannot go back in time to change the past, you can recognize the truth in this moment. Ignorance is never free. Every day you live without financial education is another day you pay a tax you cannot see, a tax extracted through stress, lost opportunities, and wasted potential. And yet, within this realization lies the first spark of freedom, because the moment you see ignorance for what it is, not a harmless gap, but a thief that steals silently, you begin to awaken. Awareness is the first step in shifting the tide. Just as a doctor cannot treat an illness until it is diagnosed, you cannot transform your financial life until you name the disease. Not knowing. The hidden cost has been draining you, but it does not have to drain your future. The greatest danger of ignorance is that it does not announce itself. You rarely realize you are paying the price until the bill is impossibly large. Unlike a sudden accident or a clear warning sign, the cost of not knowing creeps slowly, weaving itself into your routines, your habits, and your expectations. You look at your bank account at the end of the month and wonder why nothing seems to change, but you convince yourself that it is just the way life is. You do not see that every financial decision carries invisible weight, and those weights accumulate until they anchor you firmly in place. You might remember the first time you signed a loan agreement. Perhaps it was for a car, perhaps for your studies, or perhaps for the credit card that seemed harmless with its low minimum payment. At that moment, the words on the page were numbers and terms you did not fully understand, but you trusted that this was normal. Everyone else seemed to be doing the same thing. Years later, you may still be paying for that decision, trapped in an agreement that seemed small at the beginning, but grew into a mountain. The ignorance was not only in signing, it was in not realizing that every dollar borrowed came with an invisible partner, interest, and interest, when ignored, is merciless. Take, for example, a man named Robert. At 24, he bought a new car financed through a loan of $15,000 at an interest rate of 9%. The monthly payment of $300 seemed manageable, and he barely thought about it. What he did not realize was that by the time the loan was paid off, he would have spent nearly $20,000 in total. That extra $5,000 was the silent penalty of not understanding interest. He shrugged it off at the time, but this pattern repeated with other loans, credit cards, and financing agreements. By 40, Robert had paid more than $60,000 in interest alone, enough to have fully funded a college education for his child. That money was not lost in a single dramatic mistake, but in the drip, drip, drip of ignorance. The cost of not knowing is not limited to debt. It also shows up in the opportunities you fail to seize. Imagine two colleagues, Lisa and Angela, who start working at the same company in 2005. Both earn $40,000 annually. Lisa spends freely, confident that retirement is something to worry about later. Angela, however, reads a short article about retirement accounts and decides to invest $300 each month into her company's plan. 20 years later, Angela's account has grown to more than $150,000, while Lisa has nothing but memories of dinners, gadgets, and vacations that are long gone. Lisa's ignorance cost her not just the money, but the security and choices Angela now enjoys. Ignorance often masquerades as freedom in the present. Freedom to spend, freedom to avoid responsibility. But in reality, it steals freedom from the future. The emotional toll of not knowing is equally heavy. You may feel the knot in your stomach every time the phone rings, wondering if it is another bill collector. You may dread opening your mailbox, knowing it contains statements you cannot bear to read. The stress compounds like debt itself, affecting your health, your sleep, and your relationships. Studies consistently show that financial stress is one of the leading causes of anxiety, depression, and divorce. Couples who never learn how to manage money together often find themselves arguing late into the night, each blaming the other, when in truth the enemy is ignorance itself. The fights are not about numbers. They are about fear, insecurity, and the silent cost of not knowing what to do. And then there is time, the one resource you can never recover. Every year you remain ignorant about money. You lose the most powerful ally you could ever have: compound growth. $10 saved at 20 has more impact than $100 saved at 40. Yet, because no one explained this to you, you may delay, thinking you will catch up later. The truth is brutal. Time lost can never be regained. That is why ignorance is so expensive. It robs you of years when small efforts could have grown into life-changing outcomes. Consider Maria, who at 22 began investing just $50 a month in a retirement account. She continued this habit for only 10 years, stopping completely at 32. By the time she turned 65, that early 10-year effort had grown to over $200,000. Her friend Daniel, however, did not begin saving until he was 35. He faithfully invested $150 a month for 30 years, 3 times the contribution Maria had made. Yet by 65, his account was smaller than hers. The difference was not discipline or income. It was knowledge applied early. Maria's awareness gave her a priceless advantage. While Daniel's ignorance cost him decades of growth, he could never recover. The hidden cost of ignorance also plays out in your dreams. You may long to start a business, travel the world, or give generously to causes you care about, but without understanding how to build a financial foundation, those dreams remain distant. Ignorance whispers that such goals are unrealistic, that only the rich or the lucky get to live that way. And so you settle for less, year after year, shrinking your vision to fit the boundaries imposed by not knowing. The saddest price of all is the unlived life. The experiences you never had, the risks you never took, the joy you never felt, simply because ignorance kept you tethered to survival. Yet perhaps the most devastating cost is how ignorance shapes your identity. Over time, you may start to believe that financial struggle is simply who you are. You tell yourself that you are not good with money, that wealth is for other people, that you were never meant to be free. This identity seeps into your self-worth, influencing the jobs you apply for, the risks you take, and the future you imagine. Ignorance convinces you that limitation is normal, and in doing so, it steals not just your money, but your confidence, your hope, and your sense of possibility. When you step back and look at the hidden cost of not knowing, it is overwhelming. Debt that drains your income, opportunities missed, time wasted, stress that damages your health, dreams abandoned, and a shrinking sense of self. These are the quiet payments you make each day you live without financial education. And while they do not appear on a monthly statement, they are real, they are heavy, and they accumulate until they define your life. The truth may be uncomfortable, but it is also liberating, because once you see the price of ignorance, you can no longer ignore it. You begin to notice the patterns, the missed chances, the silent fees that have shaped your past. And in that awareness, you discover the possibility of change. You realize that while you have already paid a steep cost, you do not have to keep paying. The bill does not have to grow larger. You can stop the drain, not through luck or talent, but through knowledge. And with knowledge comes the first true taste of freedom. Chapter 2, Lessons Money Never Taught You in School. You spent years sitting in classrooms, filling notebooks with formulas, dates, and definitions. You memorized the steps of the water cycle, the structure of a cell, and the causes of wars fought centuries ago. Yet when you graduated, you entered a world where bills arrived each month. Banks offered loans with small print you could barely understand, and your paycheck seemed to vanish the moment it landed in your account. You quickly realized that despite all the time you spent in school, no one had ever truly prepared you for the daily reality of money. The silence was deafening, and the consequences were immediate. The education system was designed to mold you into a worker, not a free individual. From the first day of kindergarten, you were taught to follow rules, to arrive on time, to complete assignments, and to obey authority. These are useful skills for employment, but they do little to teach you how to create independence. Schools rarely, if ever, teach you how to manage a budget, how interest accumulates on debt, or how to evaluate an investment. You were trained to exchange hours for wages, not to think in terms of assets, leverage, or financial growth. The result is that entire generations leave school knowing how to solve algebraic equations, but unable to calculate how long it will take to pay off a credit card balance of $3,000 at an interest rate of 18%. This silence is not accidental. Schools operate on a model built during the industrial age, when governments and corporations needed disciplined workers more than financially independent citizens. You were taught enough to function, but not enough to question the system. If financial education were truly emphasized, more people might resist the debt-driven culture that fuels banks, lenders, and corporations. Instead, ignorance is convenient to those in power. And so you left the classroom without the tools you needed most, entering adulthood blind to the rules of the game you were already playing. Consider the story of Thomas. He was a bright student, graduating near the top of his class in 2008. He knew how to write essays, analyze literature, and solve physics problems. But when it came time to choose a college loan, he simply signed the documents handed to him, trusting that repayment would somehow sort itself out. By the time he graduated with a degree in history, he owed nearly $40,000. His first job paid $32,000 per year, and the monthly loan payment consumed more than one-third of his take-home income. No teacher had ever explained the long-term impact of borrowing, nor had they shown him how to calculate the lifetime cost of that decision. For Thomas, the lesson came too late, and the price was heavy. Schools also fail to teach the emotional side of money. You may know that stress accompanies financial struggle, but you were never trained to manage the feelings of fear, shame, and anxiety that arise when your bank balance is low. Instead, you were left to stumble into adulthood, learning through painful mistakes. You may recall your first overdraft fee, a $35 penalty for a single mistake in timing. That sting was your true education, but it came at a cost you could have avoided had you been taught even the basics of cash flow management. Ignorance forces you to pay for your own schooling through loss, stress, and failure. There's also the illusion of stability that school plants in your mind. From a young age, you were told to study hard, get good grades, and secure a steady job. That formula worked for some in the past, but the modern economy no longer guarantees safety through employment. Companies downsize, industries collapse, and technology replaces jobs once considered secure. Yet because you were never taught how to create multiple streams of income, how to invest, or how to protect yourself against instability, you are left vulnerable. A single layoff can wipe out years of effort, and you realize too late that hard work alone is not a shield. The absence of financial education in school is not just a personal inconvenience. It is a societal wound. Millions of people graduate each year, ready to contribute their skills to the workforce, yet unprepared to manage the very income they will earn. This ignorance fuels cycles of debt, stress, and dependence. Governments know it. Corporations know it. And still, the silence continues. It is as if the most important class was deliberately removed from the curriculum, leaving you to navigate the most complex system of your life with no map. Imagine if things were different. Imagine if, at age 15, you had been taught how compound interest could turn $100 invested each month into over $200,000 by the time you turn 65. Imagine if, instead of memorizing the capitals of distant countries, you've been shown how to read a bank statement, how to compare mortgage terms, or how to identify a predatory loan. That knowledge would have changed not only your finances, but your confidence, your relationships, and your future. The cost of ignorance is magnified because the solutions are simple. A few lessons in school could save you from decades of struggle, but those lessons were never given, and so you had to pay for them the hard way. The gap left by school is why so many adults feel like imposters in their own financial lives. You may be competent in your profession, respected by your peers, even admired for your intelligence, yet feel completely lost when it comes to money. That embarrassment often silences you further. You hesitate to ask questions, fearing judgment. You avoid financial conversations, pretend to understand terms you do not. And so ignorance compounds, just like interest on unpaid debt. Each year you delay learning, the price grows higher. In the end, the truth is undeniable. The system was never designed to teach you how to win. It was designed to prepare you to participate, to obey, to serve. Real financial education, budgeting, investing, wealth building was left for you to discover on your own, usually too late, often through painful trial and error. The school took your time, but it left you unarmed for the battle ahead. And the scars of that omission are written on every bill, every loan, every sleepless night. When you think back to your years in school, you might remember the sound of bells marking each hour, the smell of old books, the rows of desks lined up in perfect order. You were trained to move as part of a system, to memorize and repeat, to absorb information that often felt disconnected from reality outside the classroom. Yet in all those years, you were never handed the tools that would matter most once you walked into adulthood. No one told you that money is not just paper or numbers on a screen, but a language, and if you do not learn to speak it, you will always be at a disadvantage. The lessons that were left out of your education are the very ones that determine the course of your life. You learn how to calculate the slope of a line, but not how to calculate the true cost of a 30-year mortgage at 4% interest. You memorize the periodic table, but no one explained how to build an emergency fund to protect yourself from the unexpected. You studied literature, but never practiced the art of negotiation that could add tens of thousands of dollars to your lifetime earnings. These omissions are not small gaps. They are gaping holes that leave you vulnerable in the one arena you cannot avoid, your financial life. The irony is striking. You were graded on your ability to recall the names of rivers, but never evaluated on your ability to understand a paycheck. You were praised for knowing the details of historical battles, but no one checked whether you could differentiate between good debt and destructive debt. Because of this, you stepped into adulthood with knowledge that may impress in a trivia game, but without the skills to avoid being trapped by credit cards, payday loans, or bad financial decisions. Think of Jason, a talented young man who excelled in mathematics. He could solve complex equations in minutes. Yet when he received his first job offer, he signed the contract without question. His salary of $38,000 per year seemed generous, but he failed to notice that the benefits package lacked a retirement plan. Had he understood the long-term impact, he might have negotiated or looked elsewhere. Instead, he spent 15 years without contributing a single dollar toward his future, losing out on hundreds of thousands in potential growth. His ignorance was not a lack of intelligence. It was a result of a system that never taught him how to apply numbers to real life. There is also the myth that intelligence in one field guarantees competence in another. You may be a brilliant engineer, a gifted artist, or a skilled nurse, but that does not mean you automatically understand how to manage money. In fact, some of the most educated individuals are the most financially lost. They were trained to master their disciplines, but left unprepared for the reality of bills, loans, taxes, and investments. It is not uncommon to meet doctors earning $200,000 per year who are drowning in debt, or lawyers billing clients at high hourly rates, but unable to build personal wealth. Their ignorance proves that school can sharpen your mind while leaving your financial life in ruins. What makes the omission even more damaging is that the world outside school punishes ignorance relentlessly. When you leave the classroom, creditors do not care that no one taught you about compound interest. Landlords do not care that you never learned how to read a lease. Employers do not care that no one explained how taxes work. The system assumes you know, and if you do not, you pay. Every late fee, every overdraft charge, every high-interest loan is a penalty for an education you never received. You become your own teacher, but the tuition is steep and often cruel. The psychological impact of this silence runs deep. Because you were never trained, you may assume that financial confusion is a personal flaw. You think, I am just bad with money, as if it were a fixed trait rather than the result of inadequate education. This belief becomes a cage. You stop seeking answers because you believe the problem is you, not the system that failed to prepare you. And so ignorance becomes self-perpetuating, trapping you in shame, silence, and missed opportunities. Consider Sarah, who graduated with honors in literature. She entered adulthood confident in her intelligence, but her financial life was chaos. She overdrew her account multiple times in her first year of independence, each mistake costing her $35 in fees. In a single year, she lost nearly $1,000 to charges she did not even know existed. Had someone shown her how to track her spending, those dollars could have funded a small savings account. Instead, she paid the price of ignorance, disguised as bad luck. The truth is, money operates on principles as simple as any subject taught in school. Budgeting, saving, investing. These are not mysteries beyond the reach of the average person. They are learnable skills, yet they were deliberately excluded from your formal education. And so you learn them later, if at all, through mistakes that cost you dearly. Imagine if you had been taught in high school that saving $200 a month from age 18 to 28, then stopping completely, could still grow into more than $500,000 by retirement. That single lesson could have changed the trajectory of your life. But instead, you learn through struggle, through trial and error, through bills and regrets. The absence of these lessons also robs you of imagination. If no one explains how money can grow, you never dream beyond survival. You accept that life is about paying bills until you die, because you were never shown another way. Education gave you facts, but it did not give you vision. It prepared you to exist within the system, but not to rise above it. And so you limit yourself, not out of lack of ability, but out of lack of exposure. The silence of schools on money is perhaps one of the greatest injustices of modern life. It sets you up for failure, then blames you when you stumble. It denies you the most empowering knowledge of all, the ability to direct your own financial destiny. By the time you realize the lessons you missed, you're already paying the cost, in interest, in stress, in lost time. But awareness is power, and once you see the omission, you cannot unsee it. The classroom may have failed you, but your education is not over. The true lessons are still available, waiting for you to claim them, if you are willing to step outside the system that never taught you. Chapter 3. The Chains of Debt. Debt has a way of presenting itself as a friend when it first appears. The glossy brochure, the smiling banker, the tempting credit card offer in your mailbox, all of it feels like an invitation to freedom. It whispers that you can have what you want today without waiting, that you can step into the life you imagine without the patience to build it. At the moment you sign, the weight feels light, almost invisible. But over time, those invisible threads tighten until you realize there were chains all along, and by then, escape feels impossible. You remember the first time you used a credit card. Perhaps it was for something small, a pair of shoes, a dinner out, a gift for someone you loved. The bill arrived, and the minimum payment seemed almost laughably small. $20, $30, what harm could it do? You paid it without worry, unaware that beneath that harmless number was an engine designed to keep you trapped. Because every dollar you failed to pay carried interest, and that interest grew silently, feeding on your ignorance. What felt like freedom was in truth the beginning of servitude. Debt does not only steal your money, it steals your peace. Each month the bill arrives, and with it comes a reminder that you are not free. You may earn a salary, yet before you touch a single cent, part of it is already spoken for. The lender stands between you and your income, demanding payment. You may tell yourself that it is manageable, that everyone has debt, that this is simply normal. But deep down, you feel the pressure. You know that without those monthly obligations, your life would look very different. That is the insidious nature of debt. It normalizes itself, convincing you that bondage is a standard way of living. Consider the story of Anthony. At 21, he took out a student loan of $25,000 to finance his education. It seemed reasonable at the time. He expected to graduate, find a job, and pay it off in a few years. But life did not unfold that way. His first job paid $36,000 per year, barely enough to cover rent, food, and transportation. The monthly student loan bill of $250 became a constant shadow. He made his payments faithfully, but interest gnawed at the balance. After 10 years, he had paid nearly $30,000, more than the original loan, yet still owed $15,000. That was a chain of debt tightening. turning one decision in youth into a burden that consumed his prime years. Debt also feeds on emotion. It offers you relief in moments of weakness. When the refrigerator breaks, when your car needs repairs, when your child needs clothes, debt is there, smiling, ready to provide. It feels like rescue, but in truth, it is enslavement disguised as kindness. Each swipe of the card is another link in the chain. Over time, you may find that entire chapters of your life were financed with borrowed money, vacations, holidays, even groceries. The interest on those purchases stretches them into the future, so that you are still paying for a meal long after you have forgotten the taste. This is how debt steals not only your wealth, but also your memory, chaining you to the past with every monthly bill. You might believe that debt is simply about numbers, but it is also about identity. Carrying debt shapes the way you see yourself. You begin to feel smaller, less powerful, less capable. You may hesitate to dream big because you know your finances cannot support it. You may avoid conversations about money with friends or partners because the shame feels unbearable. Debt convinces you that you are irresponsible, that you're behind, that you are unworthy of the life you desire. And the longer you carry it, the more you believe those lies. The chain is not just around your wallet. It is around your mind. There is also the cruel irony that debt punishes the poor more than the rich. A wealthy individual may borrow at low rates to invest in assets, but the average person is forced to borrow at high rates to survive. Payday lenders charge triple-digit interest rates to those who can least afford it. Credit cards trap those who miss a single payment, escalating fees and penalties until the balance doubles or triples. Debt becomes a cycle. The less you have, the more you borrow. The more you borrow, the less you have. It is a trap designed to keep you running without ever escaping. Think of a family earning $45,000 a year. Their car breaks down, and they do not have savings. A $2,000 repair goes on a credit card. They promise themselves they will pay it off quickly, but then the medical bills arrive, another emergency hits, and soon the balance grows to $6,000. At an interest rate of 19%, if they pay only the minimum, they will spend more than $10,000 over the years to eliminate that debt. What began as a $2,000 problem turns into a $10,000 chain. That is how debt multiplies itself, feeding on the vulnerable, tightening its hold with every passing month. The hidden cruelty of debt is that it does not simply drain your finances, it steals your future. Every dollar you send to a lender is a dollar that could have been invested, saved, or used to build freedom. Instead, it vanishes into someone else's pocket, enriching the institutions that profit from your ignorance. Over a lifetime, the numbers are staggering. If you carry an average of $5,000 in credit card debt at an interest rate of 18%, and you only make minimum payments, you could spend more than 15 years paying it off, with total payments exceeding $12,000. That means $7,000 evaporated, not because you spent it, but because you did not know how to escape. Debt is a thief that never tires. It does not rest, it does not forgive, it does not forget. You can ignore it for a season, but it will wait for you, growing in silence. And the longer you wait, the heavier the chains become. The tragedy is not only the money lost, but the years wasted in servitude. Years that could have been spent building, creating, and living fully are instead consumed by payments to a debt that once felt harmless. That is why debt is not just a financial issue. It is a life issue. It dictates where you live, what you eat, the risks you take, the dreams you allow yourself to pursue. And yet, even in the darkest chapters, there is clarity to be gained. Recognizing debt as chains is the first step toward breaking them. The danger is not only in owing money, but in pretending that debt is neutral, that it is just part of life. Once you see it for what it is, a system designed to profit from your ignorance, you can begin to resist. You can begin to imagine life without the weight, life where your income serves you instead of lender, life where the chains are broken. That vision may feel distant, but acknowledging the prison is the first act of freedom. Debt does not shout when it enters your life. It slips in quietly, dressed as opportunity, disguised as convenience. By the time you realize the trap, you are already carrying the weight. You tell yourself it is temporary, that next month will be better, that soon you will get ahead. But each month arrives with the same demand, and you begin to understand that debt is not simply a balance on paper. It is a master that rules your time, your energy, and your future. One of the cruelest aspects of debt is the way it steals your sense of progress. You may work long hours, receive your paycheck, and yet watch it vanish almost instantly into bills, minimum payments, and obligations you cannot ignore. You are running hard, but you never seem to move forward. This is not because you lack discipline or because you are lazy. It is because debt ensures that no matter how much you earn, a portion is already claimed before it reaches your hands. You are not working for yourself. You are working for the lender. Every hour at your job is split, with part of it belonging not to your future, but to the institution that holds your debt. Consider the story of Melissa, a young professional who graduated with student loans totaling $48,000. Her monthly payment was nearly $450. She also carried 3 credit cards, with balances adding up to $12,000. The minimum payments on those cards totaled another $300. Together, $750 disappeared from her paycheck every single month before she even considered rent, food, or transportation. Over the course of a year, she handed over $9,000 just to maintain her debt, much of it going only to interest. After 10 years, she realized she had paid nearly $90,000 and still owed $30,000. The debt consumed her 20s and 30s, leaving her drained and trapped in a cycle she could not escape. Debt has a way of making promises it never keeps. It tells you that financing a car will give you freedom, but the monthly payment ensures you cannot take risks with your career. It tells you that buying a house with a mortgage will give you stability, but the crushing weight of 30 years of payments can make you a prisoner in your own home. It tells you that credit cards offer rewards, points, and benefits, but the fine print hides interest rates that erase any advantage. Debt seduces with the language of opportunity, but delivers only bondage. There's also the constant stress that debt brings into your relationships. You may argue with your partner about money, not because of greed, but because of fear. One of you wants to spend to ease attention. The other wants to save to find relief, and both of you feel unheard. Debt whispers that you are failing, and that whisper becomes a shout in your marriage, your friendships, even your family life. Children grow up hearing the stress in their parents' voices, absorbing the anxiety that debt creates. They may not understand the details, but they feel the tension, and that tension shapes their view of money for years to come. Debt does not only bind you, it casts a shadow over everyone around you. What makes the chain so heavy is the illusion that you cannot live without them. Society normalizes debt at every turn. Advertisements encourage you to finance your lifestyle. Banks send you pre-approved cards as if they are gifts. Universities push student loans as though they are harmless stepping stones. Car dealerships make it sound normal to take on payments for 6, 7, or even 8 years. At every turn, you're told that debt is simply part of adulthood. And because everyone around you seems to be carrying it, you accept the chains as if they were natural. But normal does not mean good, and common does not mean wise. Think of Michael, who at 28 decided he deserved a new car. He financed $30,000 at an interest rate of 7% for 72 months. His payment of nearly $500 a month became a weight he carried for 6 years. By the time the loan was paid, he had spent more than $36,000, and the car was worth less than half that amount. During those years, he also carried a balance on his credit card, averaging $5,000. By paying only the minimum, he extended that debt for over a decade, spending more than $10,000 in interest. Altogether, his decisions cost him more than $20,000 beyond the price tags. That money could have funded investments, a down payment on a home, or the freedom to change careers. Instead, it vanished into the pockets of lenders. The chains of debt are not only financial, they are psychological. When you owe money, you hesitate to dream. You silence your ambition because you feel unworthy of freedom. You tell yourself that you cannot start a business, cannot take a trip, cannot invest, because debt stands in the way. Over time, you begin to confuse the weight of debt with the weight of life itself. You think, this is just how things are. But that is a lie. Life is not meant to be lived under constant pressure, and financial education proves that there is another way. The tragedy is that debt often begins with good intentions. You borrow to study, believing education will open doors. You borrow to buy a home, believing it will give stability. You borrow to cover emergencies, believing you will repay quickly. But intentions do not erase consequences. Without knowledge, those good intentions turn into anchors, dragging you down year after year. The path to freedom begins with recognizing that debt is not neutral. It is not a tool to be carried lightly. It is a master, and every decision to borrow is a decision to surrender a piece of your future. Debt will always offer you comfort in the moment, but it demands years in return. Every purchase you finance is a trade, exchanging tomorrow's peace for today's relief. The chains are not forged in a single moment, but link by link, choice by choice, until you find yourself bound. The only way to break them is to refuse to accept them as normal, to see them for what they are, a silent prison that grows tighter with time. And once you recognize the prison, you can begin to imagine freedom. Chapter 4. The Illusion of Hard Work. From the time you were a child, you were told that hard work was the key to success. Parents, teachers, mentors all echoed the same message. If you just work harder, if you push longer, if you sacrifice more, life will reward you. It is a noble belief, and it carries a certain truth, but it is not the whole truth. What you are not told is that hard work, by itself, does not guarantee freedom. In fact, when misdirected, it can become another trap, chaining you to a life of exhaustion without reward. You may already know this feeling. You wake early, commute to your job, spend 8, 9, even 10 hours giving your best, and then come home drained. You collect your paycheck every 2 weeks, and yet somehow the numbers never seem to rise beyond survival. You are working harder than ever, but progress is elusive. The truth is that effort, without strategy, is often wasted. Hard work is valuable, but only when it is aimed at the right target. Otherwise, it is like digging a hole with a spoon when a shovel is available. You may be sweating, but you are not advancing. This illusion is dangerous because it makes you believe the problem is always you. When your finances do not improve, you assume you must not be working hard enough. So you take on overtime, add a second job, sacrifice weekends, and still find yourself behind. The system loves this illusion because it keeps you busy while you fail to notice the real issue. It is not that you are lazy. It is that you are playing a game without understanding the rules. Hard work, in ignorance, enriches others while leaving you drained. Consider the story of Javier, a man who worked in construction. He labored long days under the sun, often 12 hours at a time, earning $45,000 per year. His cousin Daniel, meanwhile, worked fewer hours but had learned about investing. Daniel earned $50,000 annually, but he consistently set aside 10% into an index fund. After 15 years, Javier had nothing but his wages and his aching back. Daniel, by contrast, had a portfolio worth more than $150,000. Both men worked, but only one directed his work through knowledge. The difference was not effort, it was understanding. This is the illusion of hard work. The belief that sweat alone builds wealth. In reality, wealth is built not just by labor, but by leverage. You cannot outwork compound interest, nor can you substitute effort for knowledge. The hours of your life are finite. No matter how hard you push, there are only 24 hours in a day. Without financial education, you sell those hours cheaply, often for wages that barely sustain you. But when you learn how money multiplies itself, you realize that your labor can be a seed, not just a trade. The illusion is especially cruel because it robs you of joy. You may convince yourself that your sacrifices will pay off someday, that endless hours now will lead to comfort later. But later often never arrives. By the time promotions come, expenses have grown. By the time raises appear, inflation has eaten their value. You look back on decades of toil and wonder why your bank account does not reflect the years you gave away. Hard work, without financial knowledge, is like pouring water into a bucket with holes. No matter how much you add, it will never be enough. There is also the hidden cost of health. Believing in the illusion of hard work often drives you to neglect your body and your relationships. You skip meals, you lose sleep, you ignore your children, you silence your dreams, all for the sake of labor that does not free you. The paycheck arrives, but the exhaustion grows. Eventually, your body demands payment through stress, illness, or burnout. The years you gave to work cannot be reclaimed, and the realization that you sacrificed them for survival, rather than freedom, is a bitter truth. Think of Angela, a nurse who worked double shifts for more than a decade. She earned $65,000 per year, often taking on overtime to push her income above $75,000. She believed that working harder would secure her family's future. Yet she never invested, never built savings, never learned how to make her money grow. At 45, she looked back and realized she'd earned nearly $1 million over her career, yet had nothing to show for it beyond bills and fatigue. Her body was tired, her spirit weary, and the future still uncertain. Hard work had consumed her life, but without direction, it had not freed her. The system perpetuates this illusion because it serves those who profit from your labor. Employers encourage you to give more, to stay late, to take on extra responsibilities, while quietly limiting your income. Governments praise hard work, but design tax systems that punish labor and reward capital. Society applauds the grind, the hustle, the sacrifice, while ignoring the truth. Effort without education does not lead to freedom. You're told to climb the ladder, but rarely shown that the ladder itself may be leaning against the wrong wall. Breaking free from this illusion begins with a shift in perspective. You must stop asking, "How can I work harder?" and begin asking, "How can I work smarter?" Smarter work does not always mean less effort. It means aligned effort. It means learning how to build assets that continue producing even when you are resting. It means understanding that 1 hour spent learning about investments may be worth more than 100 hours of overtime. It means realizing that the ultimate goal is not just to earn money, but to create systems where money begins to earn for you. The illusion of hard work is seductive because it feels noble. You are praised for your dedication, admired for your sacrifice, even pitted for your exhaustion. But applause does not build wealth. Only knowledge, applied with intention, can do that. Hard work has its place, but without strategy, it becomes another chain, as heavy as debt, as relentless as ignorance. To see through the illusion is not to reject effort, but to redirect it. You must stop trading your life for survival and begin using your labor as a stepping stone to freedom. There is a cruel irony in believing that hard work alone will set you free. The harder you push, the more you often feel trapped. Each hour you give away becomes another brick in a wall that separates you from the life you long for. You may think that working more is the answer, but the truth is that without strategy, every additional hour only deepens a rut. You end up tired, worn, and still dependent on a paycheck that vanishes almost as soon as it arrives. This is the illusion that has been fed to you since childhood, that sweat equals success, that exhaustion equals achievement, that busyness equals progress. But none of those are guarantees. Hard work without direction is like rowing a boat with all your strength while facing the wrong way. You may feel the ache in your muscles, the burn in your lungs, the sweat dripping down your face, but when you look around, you are still in the same place. You confuse effort with advancement. You confuse motion with growth. And because society praises hustle, you believe that endless motion is enough. It is not. Think of Mark, who worked 2 jobs for nearly 20 years. By day, he was a delivery driver, earning $42,000 annually. By night, he cleaned offices, adding another $18,000 to his income. On paper, $60,000 per year should have been enough to build a modest future. But Mark never invested. He never learned to multiply his income. Every dollar went toward bills, groceries, or short-term pleasures. When his health began to fail at 55, he had no savings, no assets, and no plan. 2 decades of sacrifice had given him nothing but fatigue. His belief in hard work alone had stolen his chance at freedom. The system thrives on people like Mark. Employers love workers who never question, who believe that loyalty and extra hours will be rewarded in the end. Banks love customers who work themselves to exhaustion, then use credit cards to fill the emotional void. Governments love taxpayers who grind endlessly, never realizing that capital gains and investments are taxed differently than wages. The entire system is designed to keep you running, because as long as you are exhausted, you have no energy left to question why you are running in the first place. You may recognize this in your own life. Perhaps you have said yes to overtime, only to see your paycheck eaten by higher taxes and rising expenses. Perhaps you have accepted promotions, believing they would change everything, only to discover that the new title came with more stress but little extra wealth. Perhaps you have sacrificed time with your family, promising yourself it was only for a season, only to realize the season never ended. These are the lies that the illusion of hard work whispers to you, that the next step, the next shift, the next sacrifice will finally deliver freedom. Yet freedom never arrives, because freedom is not built on hours. It is built on knowledge. What makes this illusion so powerful is that it appeals to your pride. You want to believe that you can work your way out of struggle, that you can muscle your way to success. There is dignity in labor, and there is nothing wrong with honest effort. But dignity does not pay your bills, and effort alone does not compound into wealth. The pride of hard work can blind you to the truth that smarter, more strategic choices could achieve in years what endless toil may never deliver in a lifetime. Take the example of Erica and Paul. Both began their careers in 2010, each earning $40,000 per year. Erica believed in the grind. She worked overtime, climbed the ladder, and by 2025 was making $75,000 annually. Paul, on the other hand, focused on learning. He read books on investing, attended seminars, and set aside 10% of his income each year. By 2025, he was still earning $55,000 annually, less than Erica. Yet Paul's investments had grown to more than $120,000, generating additional income each year without his labor. Erica's bank account was nearly empty, her lifestyle inflated by her salary. Paul was on a path to independence, while Erica remained trapped in the cycle of work. Both worked hard, but only one worked with vision. The illusion of hard work also blinds you to the cost of time. Every hour you sell is an hour you cannot reclaim. Time is the most precious resource you have, yet you are taught to exchange it cheaply, often for wages that barely cover survival. When you are young, you believe you have endless time to make up for lost opportunities. But years slip away faster than you expect, and one day you realize that decades have been sold for promise of security that never came. The harsh truth is that time cannot be refunded. Every hour you give without purpose is an hour gone forever. This is why financial education is so powerful. It teaches you that the value of your time is not fixed by an employer, but by how you choose to use it. 1 hour spent learning how money multiplies can be worth more than 100 hours of labor. One decision to invest can carry more weight than a year of overtime. One choice to build an asset can generate income for decades, long after you have stopped working. Knowledge turns time into a tool, while ignorance wastes it in endless toil. You may feel the weight of this illusion pressing on you even now. Perhaps you are working long hours, yet sensing that freedom is not arriving. Perhaps you are earning more than you once dreamed, yet realizing that you are still not secure. Perhaps you are exhausted, drained, and quietly asking yourself if this is really all life has to offer. These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of awakening. They are the cracks in the illusion, revealing the truth hidden beneath. Hard work is not the enemy. Misplaced hard work is. Effort matters, but direction matters more. You cannot keep rowing endlessly and expect to arrive on shore unless you know where the shore is. You cannot keep selling hours and expect freedom unless you build assets that work while you rest. The illusion of hard work is powerful, but once you see through it, you can begin to redirect your energy. You can stop exhausting yourself for survival and start investing your time, your money, and your knowledge into freedom. And when that shift happens, when you stop worshiping work and start valuing wisdom, you discover something remarkable. Life was never meant to be an endless grind. It was meant to be lived with purpose, with peace, with vision. Hard work has its place, but it was never meant to be your prison. Chapter 5, The Power of Knowledge Applied. Knowledge by itself is not enough. You can read dozens of books, attend countless seminars, and fill your head with financial theories. But until that knowledge is acted upon, it remains dormant. You may feel smarter, you may sound impressive in conversations, but your life will not change simply because you understand the concepts. Transformation begins the moment knowledge is put into motion. When you decide to apply what you have learned to your daily habits, your decisions, and your vision for the future, that is when the real power of financial education reveals itself. You have likely met people who know what they should do, but never do it. They talk about saving, investing, budgeting, and building wealth, but their bank accounts tell another story. They live paycheck to paycheck, not because they lack information, but because they never bridge the gap between theory and practice. Knowledge without application is like owning a map and never leaving your driveway. You know where the destination is, but you never arrive. The power lies not in the map itself, but in your willingness to follow it. Applying financial knowledge begins with small, deliberate steps. It is the choice to save even when it feels inconvenient. It is the discipline to invest even when the market feels uncertain. It is a decision to budget even when you would rather spend freely. These small acts may not feel revolutionary in the moment, but over time they accumulate into massive results. $1 invested wisely grows. One expense avoided multiplies into opportunity. One habit practiced consistently rewrites your future. The magic is not in sudden leaps, but in steady application. Consider the story of Rachel. At 26, she earned $40,000 per year and lived with the same financial struggles as her peers. But one evening, after reading a simple article on compound interest, she decided to open an investment account. She set aside just $100 each month. At first, it felt insignificant. $100 was barely noticeable against her expenses, and she sometimes wondered if it was worth it. But she continued. 10 years later, those small deposits had grown to over $18,000, thanks to steady returns. By 36, while many of her friends still had no savings, Rachel had a foundation. The knowledge she applied, even in small amounts, became a fortress for her future. This is the difference application makes. Without action, Rachel's article would have been just another piece of information consumed and forgotten. With action, it became the seed of freedom. You, too, may already know what you should do. You may know that saving matters, that debt is dangerous, that investing is powerful. But knowledge alone will not protect you. You must put it to work. The act of applying knowledge also reshapes your identity. The first time you choose to invest instead of spend, you begin to see yourself not as a consumer, but as a builder. The first time you stick to a budget, you realize that you have power over your money rather than the other way around. The first time you say no to debt, you declare that your future is worth more than temporary comfort. These small victories accumulate, not just in your finances, but in your confidence. Each step you take reinforces a belief that you are capable of change, that you're no longer a victim of ignorance, but a participant in wisdom. Applying knowledge also exposes you to the reality of time. The earlier you begin, the greater the reward. You may hesitate, telling yourself you will start later, when income is higher or when life is calmer. But delay is the enemy of growth. Knowledge applied today, even in small ways, outpaces knowledge delayed tomorrow. If you save $200 a month starting at age 25, by 65 you could have well over $500,000, depending on returns. If you wait until 35 to start, you may need to save twice as much each month to achieve the same result. The principle is simple. Action multiplies with time, but procrastination steals it. Think of Jonathan, who understood this too late. At 30, he attended a workshop on investing and left inspired. He promised himself he would start investing soon, but life felt busy, and he kept postponing. 10 years passed before he finally opened his account at 40. By then, he had lost a decade of growth. Over the next 25 years, he worked diligently, but his late start meant his portfolio never reached the levels it could have. He ended up with $300,000, a respectable sum, but had he applied what he knew at 30, he could have ended with more than double. The difference was not intelligence or income. It was a choice to delay action. The beauty of applied knowledge is that it creates momentum. At first, the steps feel small, almost laughable. But over time, they build habits, and those habits build results. Saving $100 may feel unimpressive, but it teaches you discipline. Investing early may not make you rich overnight, but it introduces you to the power of compounding. Choosing to live below your means may not feel glamorous, but it lays the foundation for freedom. These actions are bricks, and when stacked consistently, they build a wall of security no crisis can easily destroy. When you begin applying what you know, you also start to see the world differently. You notice opportunities others miss. You understand risks others ignore. You recognize patterns that others cannot see. Financial literacy sharpens your vision, but application sharpens your results. It turns abstract principles into concrete outcomes. The act of doing transforms you from a student into a practitioner, from a consumer into an investor, from a dreamer into a creator. The truth is that freedom does not come from knowledge alone. It comes from knowledge lived, knowledge practiced, knowledge applied again and again until it becomes second nature. You cannot think your way to financial independence. You must act your way there. And the moment you begin acting, even imperfectly, you separate yourself from the masses who know but never do. That separation is the beginning of transformation. The act of applying knowledge does more than change your bank account. It changes the way you experience life itself. When you begin to put what you know into practice, you start to see the world through a different lens. You no longer look at money as something that passes through your hands, gone as quickly as it arrives. Instead, you begin to recognize it as a tool, a servant that works for you when directed wisely. That shift is subtle at first, but once it takes hold, it rewrites your relationship with every decision you make. You may remember the first time you set aside money for an investment. The amount felt small, almost insignificant, but as the months passed and the balance grew, you experienced a new sensation: control. For the first time, you were not just reacting to bills or emergencies. You were building something that belonged to you. That act of application did not just grow your savings. It grew your sense of empowerment. Knowledge without action keeps you in theory. Knowledge with action creates transformation. The remarkable truth is that applied knowledge multiplies itself. When you practice what you learn, you gain more than results. You gain insight. You begin to notice mistakes more quickly. You adapt faster, and you refine your strategies. Reading about budgeting is one thing. Living by a budget teaches you lessons no book can fully capture. Study investing gives you theory. Placing money in the market teaches you patience, discipline, and emotional strength to endure ups and downs. Each act of application teaches you something new, deepening your wisdom far beyond what theory alone could offer. Consider the story of Samuel. In his early 30s, he attended a financial workshop where he learned about real estate investing. Inspired, he bought a small duplex, living in one unit while renting the other. At first, the process was overwhelming: tenant calls, maintenance issues, unexpected costs. But each challenge taught him something that no lecture could have prepared him for. Within a few years, Samuel had acquired more properties, each one funded by the experience and confidence gained from the last. By 45, he was earning more from his properties than from his job. The workshop gave him knowledge, but it was the act of applying it, buying that first duplex, that transformed his life. Application also builds resilience. When you take action, you will make mistakes. You will choose investments that do not perform well, create budgets that you fail to follow perfectly, or attempt ventures that fall short. But each mistake is a teacher. Unlike the vague regret of inaction, the lessons of applied knowledge are specific and sharp. You learn why something failed, how to improve, and what to avoid in the future. Over time, these lessons accumulate, making you wiser and stronger. Failure, when paired with application, becomes a stepping stone instead of a dead end. Think of Caroline, who decided to start investing in stocks at 29. Her first choices were impulsive, driven by excitement rather than research, and she lost nearly $2,000 in her first year. Many would have quit, but Caroline chose to view the loss as tuition for her financial education. She studied, adjusted, and applied what she learned with more care. Within 5 years, she had built a portfolio worth $50,000. The loss hurt, but the application built resilience, and resilience built results. Applied knowledge also creates a ripple effect in the lives of those around you. When you begin practicing financial wisdom, you influence your family, your friends, and even your children. A child who sees a parent budgeting, saving, and investing grows up believing that those habits are normal. A spouse who witnesses consistency begins to trust not only the finances, but also the relationship. Friends may ask questions, inspired by the changes they see in your life. The knowledge you apply becomes a seed that multiplies, not only in your own life, but in the lives of others. There is a striking difference between knowing and doing. You may know that carrying credit card debt is destructive, but until you take the step to pay it down aggressively, the knowledge remains powerless. You may know that creating an emergency fund is wise, but until you begin setting aside even $50 a month, the wisdom sits idle. You may know that investing early is powerful, but until you open an account and make the deposit, the potential goes unrealized. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people live. They are full of information, yet empty of results. Closing that gap is what separates those who dream of freedom from those who actually achieve it. Application also brings clarity to your values. When you begin directing your money intentionally, you're forced to ask deeper questions. What truly matters to me? What am I willing to sacrifice today for tomorrow? What kind of future am I building? These questions cut to the noise of impulse and desire, grounding you in purpose. You stop chasing every shiny distraction because your actions align with your vision. Knowledge tells you what is possible. Application reveals what is important. Perhaps the most profound gift of applied knowledge is hope. When you take action and see results, even small ones, you begin to believe that change is possible. A savings account that once sat empty begins to grow. A debt balance that once felt immovable begins to shrink. An investment that once felt intimidating begins to generate returns. These small victories fuel your belief that freedom is not just a dream, but a destination. Each step proves that you are capable, that you are moving forward, that you are no longer powerless. In the end, the lesson is simple yet demanding. Knowledge must move through your hands, not just your mind. Theories will not pay your bills. Ideas will not build your wealth. Understanding without application will not change your life. But once you act, once you take what you know and put it into practice, you unlock a force greater than effort, greater than intention, greater than hope. You unlock the power of knowledge lived. Chapter 6. Freedom through Financial Education. Freedom is a word that stirs something deep inside you. It is a dream that lingers behind every late-night thought, every sigh of exhaustion, every longing for a better life. Yet for many, freedom remains elusive, not because it is impossible, but because it has been misunderstood. Freedom is not merely the absence of debt, nor is it the luxury of the wealthy. True freedom is the ability to choose, the power to live without chains, the peace of knowing that your life is directed by vision rather than by fear. And that kind of freedom is born only through financial education applied with discipline. You may not notice the weight you are carrying until you imagine life without it. Picture waking up tomorrow without a single bill that you dread, without the anxiety of wondering if your paycheck will last until the end of the month. Imagine choosing to work because you want to, not because you must. Imagine traveling, giving, or resting without asking permission from your bank account. That is a promise of financial freedom, not perfection, but choice. And every step you take in learning about money brings that vision closer to reality. Financial education gives you tools to dismantle the chains that once held you. Debt, once overwhelming, becomes manageable when you understand interest and repayment strategies. Savings, once impossible, becomes natural when you see the power of consistent deposits. Investing, once intimidating, becomes exciting when you grasp the simplicity of compounding. Each concept you apply unlocks another door, removing another barrier, giving you more control over your destiny. The education itself is not freedom, but it builds a pathway to it. Consider the story of Evelyn. For years, she struggled under the weight of credit card debt. Every month, she paid the minimum, believing that was all she could do. At 32, she attended a free financial literacy seminar at her local library. For the first time, she saw her debt clearly. $12,000, with an interest rate that guaranteed she would pay nearly triple if she continued making only minimum payments. Armed with this knowledge, she created a plan. She stopped using her cards, redirected every extra dollar toward the highest interest balance, and began tracking her progress. In 3 years, she was debt-free. But more than that, she was transformed. Evelyn no longer feared her bills. She no longer avoided her statements. Knowledge had turned her burden into a challenge, and her challenge into victory. This is the essence of freedom through financial education. You move from being controlled to being in control. The numbers no longer intimidate you because you understand them. The choices no longer paralyze you because you know how to evaluate them. The future no longer terrifies you because you've built a foundation to stand on. Education transforms fear into clarity, and clarity into action. But financial freedom is not only about security, it is also about opportunity. When you are no longer bound by debt or scarcity, you gain the power to pursue what truly matters to you. You may choose to start a business, knowing you have the savings to sustain the risk. You may choose to travel, knowing your investments are working while you rest. You may choose to give generously, knowing your wealth can extend beyond your own needs. Freedom is not about doing nothing. It is about doing what aligns with your deepest values. Think of Marcus, who spent years working as a teacher. He loved his job, but often felt constrained by his paycheck. At 40, after years of studying and applying financial principles, he had built a portfolio that covered his basic expenses. For the first time, he was free to make choices not based on survival but on passion. He continued teaching, but with a renewed sense of joy, because he no longer feared losing his job. Financial education had given him the one thing money itself could not buy: peace of mind. Freedom also changes the way you see time. Instead of trading every hour for dollars, you begin to recognize that your money can work for you. Each investment is like an employee, producing results whether you are awake or asleep. Each habit is like a seed, compounding over years into something far greater than its beginning. You no longer see time as an enemy slipping away, but as an ally multiplying your efforts. That shift reshapes your entire life. The most profound aspect of financial freedom is the way it restores dignity. Poverty and debt strip you of choices, leaving you feeling small and powerless. But education, applied with persistence, restores your agency. You no longer wait for someone else to rescue you, because you have learned how to rescue yourself. You no longer settle for survival, because you know how to build stability. You no longer fear the future, because you have prepared for it. Freedom is not a gift handed to you. It is a result of knowledge lived day by day until the chains fall away. And when you taste that freedom, you understand why financial education matters so deeply. It is not just about numbers on a page. It is about waking up without fear. It is about walking through life with confidence. It is about knowing that you have choices, that your future is not dictated by ignorance, but guided by wisdom. That is the life you were meant to live, not one constant struggle, but one of empowered freedom. The moment you embrace financial education as a lifelong practice, freedom begins to take root in your life. It does not arrive in a single dramatic event. It is not the day you pay off your last loan or the moment you cross a certain number in your investment account. Freedom grows slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. It is built choice by choice, habit by habit, and eventually you look back and realize you stepped into a life you once thought was impossible. Financial freedom does not mean you will never face challenges. Emergencies will come, economies will shift, markets will rise and fall. But the difference is that you will no longer face them from a place of ignorance or helplessness. Instead, you will face them with preparation, perspective, and power. You will know how to adjust, how to protect yourself, how to recover. That resilience is itself a form of freedom. Ignorance leaves you vulnerable. Education equips you with armor. You may think of freedom as a distant milestone, but in truth, you can begin to experience it long before you are wealthy. Freedom is in the relief you feel when your first emergency fund covers an unexpected bill. Freedom is in the satisfaction of watching your debt shrink month after month. Freedom is in the peace of knowing your investments are quietly working for you in the background. These moments remind you that progress is real, that each step matters, that you are no longer standing still. Consider the journey of Daniel and Grace, a married couple who once lived in constant financial tension. Their combined income was modest, just under $50,000 per year, and debt consumed nearly half of it. They fought about money, avoided conversations about the future, and felt trapped in a cycle of bills. At a friend's urging, they enrolled in a financial literacy course. Together, they created a budget, cut unnecessary expenses, and focused on paying down their highest interest debt first. Within 3 years, they were debt-free. Within 5, they had built savings equal to 1 year of expenses. For the first time, they could plan vacations without guilt, consider opportunities without fear, and dream about retirement with hope. Their income had not doubled, but their education had transformed their destiny. Freedom was not a number. It was a result of knowledge applied consistently. Education is also what allows you to redefine wealth. Society often portrays wealth as luxury cars, large houses, and extravagant lifestyles. But financial education teaches you that true wealth is measured in time, peace, and choices. A person earning $50,000 a year with no debt, investments growing, and a life aligned with their values may be far freer than someone earning $200,000 but chained to debt, stress, and obligation. Freedom is not about how much you make. It is about how much you keep, how wisely you direct it, and how aligned it is with the life you want to live. When you live with financial freedom, you begin to experience a deeper kind of generosity, no longer shackled by the fear of scarcity. You are able to give without hesitation. You can support causes that matter to you, help family members in need, or invest in your community. Your wealth extends beyond your own life, touching others and multiplying its impact. This is one of the most overlooked aspects of financial freedom, the ability to live for something greater than yourself. Ignorance keeps you clinging to survival. Education allows you to open your hands, knowing there will always be enough. Another profound aspect of freedom is the way it reshapes your future generations. When you learn and apply financial principles, you do not just change your own life, you change the inheritance of knowledge passed down to your children. A child who grows up seeing savings, investments, and responsible decisions will carry those lessons into adulthood. You are not only building wealth for yourself, you are breaking cycles of ignorance and planting seeds of wisdom that will grow for decades to come. That is legacy, and legacy is the highest form of freedom. Freedom through financial education is not about escaping work altogether, but about transforming your relationship with it. You may still choose to work, but you will do so with joy rather than desperation. You will choose projects, careers, or businesses that align with your passions, rather than clinging to jobs out of fear. You will no longer ask, how will I survive if I stop? But instead, what do I want to create next? That shift from survival to creation is the essence of freedom. And finally, freedom brings peace. It is the peace of knowing you are prepared, the peace of knowing you can handle what comes, the peace of waking up without the constant weight of financial stress pressing on your chest. This peace cannot be purchased in a store. It cannot be gifted to you by luck or circumstance. It is built through knowledge, knowledge you sought, knowledge you applied, knowledge you lived. Your journey may not be finished, but the path is clear. Freedom is not reserved for the lucky or the gifted. It is not a privilege handed to a chosen few. It is available to anyone willing to learn, to apply, and to persist. You are not powerless. You are not doomed to struggle forever. With each lesson you apply, with each choice you make, you move closer to the life of freedom you were meant to live. And one day, you will wake up and realize the chains have fallen, not because someone freed you, but because you learned to free yourself.